Let's bring in Republican Congressman Peter King, a member of the House Intelligence Committee, who has been briefed on the Nairobi attack. Congressman King, thanks for joining us this morning. What can you tell us about what kind of attack this was, who they believe is responsible?
Well, Martha, this was a very sophisticated attack, very similar to what we saw in Mumbai. And by all indicators, this was carried out by al-Shabaab, which is based out of Somalia. When I was chairman of the Homeland Security Committee 2 years ago, I conducted a hearing on al-Shabaab. It's an extremely deadly organization, very well trained, and is one of the only al-Qaeda affiliates which actually has actively recruited here in the United States. There is at least 40 to 50 Somali Americans have gone from the United States to Somalia to be trained. A number of them have been killed, but there's others still alive. So I would assume that the FBI and local law enforcement are looking into those Somali American communities today for any leads or indicators, using all their sources and resources to make sure that there's no follow-up attempt here in the United States.
And how about any information on whether some of those Somali Americans might be involved in this attack? Anything on that yet?
No, I have not heard if any of them are involved or not. We know there's probably still 15 to 20 Somali Americans who are still active over there. The concern would be if any of them have come back to the United States and would use those abilities here in the United States. Also, Martha, this shows, I think, the really growing influence of al-Qaeda in Africa. You have al-Shabaab now in Somalia going off into Kenya, carrying out an attack outside its own country. You know, for years, the State Department did not want to declare al-Shabaab a terrorist organization because they thought it was just focusing on tribal issues within Somalia. Now we see by attacking into Kenya, they certainly have an international dimension to them. You also have Boko Haram in Nigeria, and also you have al-Shabaab working closely with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Yemen. So we're talking about very significant terrorist groups here, which are showing a capacity to attack outside their borders and actually recruit people from here in the United States.
And really one of the biggest terrorist attacks in Kenya since the 1998 bombing of the U.S. Embassy.
Now, this is a particularly brutal attack, and it almost seems as if the terror world is coming full cycle, because one of the first major attacks we recall against the United States was the attacks on the embassies back in 1998, and now we have 15 years later a massacre, really a well-coordinated, well-planned, horrific massacre. I mean, they attacked at the busiest time of the week, the busiest time of the day. They knew what they were doing. They took the hostages. So this is, again, very similar to Mumbai, and showing that al-Qaeda and its affiliates are still extremely powerful and is still able to really strike terror into the hearts of people. Attacking a shopping mall, it has no military significance at all. This is clearly an attack to terrorize and murder innocent civilians. And if the reports are true that they were allowing Muslims to leave and focusing on non-Muslims, again, they're making this part of their jihadist war.
Thank you very much, Congressman King, for joining us. Now, for more on the al-Qaeda threat and the risk to Americans, both here and abroad, we're joined by ABC's senior Justice Department correspondent Pierre Thomas, Fran Townsend, a former Homeland Security advisor to President Bush and a CNN contributor, and General Peter Chiarelli, former Vice Chief of Staff in the Army and former senior military assistant to the Secretary of Defense. I want to start with you, Fran Townsend. If you were still in that job right now, what would you be looking for?
Oh, I want to know, it's the very question you asked to Congressman King, Martha. I want to know, were there any of those recruited Somali Americans who are, we know, over there fighting, were any of them involved in this attack? And what is the FBI doing to identify potential threats in this country? Look, an attack to a U.S. mall, it's a soft target, very difficult to protect. And so it's long been a worry. Now, you know, Congressman King mentioned the hearing he had held. They identified 40 to 50 Americans who had been recruited by al-Shabaab. More than half of those come from Minnesota. And so you can imagine the FBI is concentrating their efforts right now domestically there.
Pierre, I know your sources have told you there's no direct threat to the homeland right now, but what do they do? How do they handle this in the United States. Are they ready for an attack like this in the United States?
They've been looking at particularly young Somali Americans in Minnesota. That group has been going back and forth into Somalia. They're very concerned about them. They have been studying their patterns because, again, the concern has been you get the training there, you come back home and perhaps do something here. But the U.S. has been deeply concerned about these kinds of attacks, as Congressman King said, since the Mumbai attacks in India in 2008. So you now have law enforcement training at malls. The FBI went to a particular
higher caliber weapons they carry?
Exactly, in the trunk of their cars. So the FBI at a conference in D.C. I went to was fascinating. They were talking to hotel officials about what you have to do in a soft target attack. And they told them, look, the terrorists are not coming to ask for demands. They're coming to kill people. So we're going to have to come in and we're going to have to fight room to room. And it was very sobering in Washington, D.C. to hear the FBI talk like that.
General Chiarelli, I want to go to you because the military set up an Africa command called AFRICOM. And what does the military do in a situation like this going forward, having watched an attack like this?
Well, I would argue that we're in much better position today than we were in 1998 with the creation of AFRICOM. It provides focus into Africa. Relationships have been built. Intelligence has been gathered and will continue to be gathered to fill in any holes that we have about what happened in this particular attack and what could happen in the future.
Let's talk about that intelligence. So the military, if they're involved in this, if al-Shabaab is involved in this, right now is probably looking for potential targets.
That's exactly right. They're developing targets and refining target lists.
By that we mean against al-Shabaab.
Yes, of course. And refining target lists, trying to fill in any gaps that we possibly have. And doing all the kinds of things you would do to gain information in what is a very chaotic situation.
Fran, they had a clear media plan here. Moments after this attack, we heard from al-Shabaab tweets coming out. That's something very new.
It is very new. I mean, and to Twitter's credit, they shut that account down pretty quickly. And interestingly enough, the Kenyan police, the police chief and the police service are also tweeting now, and the police chief just this morning encouraged family members who are missing people to direct message them on Twitter. And so we're seeing the use of social media both by the bad guys and by the good guys to collect information, to collect additional data. You know, this is not al-Shabaab's first attack outside Somalia. In fact, several years ago, it was at a cafe around the World Cup in Kampala, Uganda. And so this is a reminder, al-Shabaab is not gone. That was not their only attack, and they will continue to rise despite having been pushed back and out of southern Somalia.
Pierre, quickly, if you will, if you're an American out there and you're worried about going to malls, what do you do? What do you say to those Americans?
Well, they have to go on with their lives, and they have to believe and hope that law enforcement has been training for issues just like this. Law enforcement says they are prepared, but the reality is if people are committed and they want to kill, you can go to a mall and you can do this. So you just have to live with that in the back of your mind, but live your life.
Thanks to all of you very much.